With reams of controversy about the gifts he's accepted, Keir Starmer has had a difficult week. But I actually think it's this interview that should win him the most opprobrium.
Are you telling those who are out of work, who may think that they can't work, that the country has a right to expect that they look for work, they do everything they can to get work? That is the sacrifice they need to make.
Well, yes, of course. In relation to long-term sickness, which is at very high levels, then of course people need to look for work, but they also need support. And that's why I've gone out to look at schemes where businesses are supporting people back into work from long-term sickness. Because quite often, I think what lies behind this is a fear for someone who's been on long-term sickness. But can they get back into the workplace? Are they going to be able to cope? Is it all going to go hopelessly wrong? Yes, they need to get back into the workplace where they can. But I do think if we can put the right support in place, which I've seen pilots of this, they work pretty well. I want to see more of those across the country. Then that is what we need to do.
Plenty of carrots, plenty of help, sticks too. If you don't do it, you don't get your benefits. You see, the man you hired to reform wealth or to help advise you, Paul Gregg, says virtually no one, his words, virtually no one should claim benefits without taking active steps to get back to work. That is your view.
Well, I think the basic proposition that you should look for work is right. Obviously, there will be hard cases, but the way I would do it is to say, yes, that's the basic proposition, but we also want to support that so that more people can get into work.
There will be hard cases. I mean, there will be thousands and thousands, maybe millions of people who were so sick it's just ridiculous to say that they could possibly go back to work. Right? I do think it's so outrageous, Keir Starmer, to try and look tough, to try and look fiscally responsible, to try and appeal to people who don't like people on welfare, is saying every single person on long-term sickness should look for a job. I won't go on about this too much because I was on the Storm Huntley show on Thursday precisely to discuss that clip. I was debating Reem Ibrahim from the Institute of Economic Affairs, who you'll hear from first.
Long-term sick. Not all of those particular people will be long-term sick. We saw a huge increase in the number of those particular people claiming those benefits since 2019, since the pandemic.
I think 500,000.
Yeah, about 500,000 since 2019. Now, I'm not saying that all of those people are lying to the government. There definitely are people that are too sick to work in the long term and are unable to actually get back into the workplace. However, there definitely are people, and we've seen an increase in these kinds of people, in these kind of claimants since 2019, since the pandemic, because the government basically relaxed the laws around it, which meant that more of them were able to claim those kind of benefits. And a lot of them are claiming it based on things like mental health. Now, there is no evidence that somebody with clinical depression or anxiety always cannot work, or the best thing for them is to be at home not working. So again, it's very difficult. There are different situations between individual people.
I think what's interesting, actually, so you're from a right-wing think tank, the Institute for Economic Affairs. I think you sounded more reasonable than Keir Starmer there, right? Because what you were saying, Reem, is that some people who are on sickness benefit, probably it would be good for everyone for them to be looking for a job, because I think getting a job can sort of raise your spirits, your self-esteem, and the increase that we have seen since the pandemic does suggest that something's going wrong. Now, I don't think we should have a punitive approach where sort of we punish people if they don't go back to work. I think there's lots of things we can try before that. But Keir Starmer there seemed to be suggesting everyone on long-term sickness benefits should be looking for a job. And to me, that just sounds completely bizarre. And not just bizarre, I imagine there'll be lots of people listening to that at home who are on long-term sickness benefit, who have the kind of illness where they think, me getting a job, that's ridiculous given the situation I'm currently in. And so not only do I think it's mistaken what he's said, I think it's quite irresponsible, because I think there might be a lot of people sitting at home who are already having a very difficult time dealing with really appalling ill health, probably waiting too long for NHS appointments. And now the Prime Minister is going on television and saying, any of you, if you're on long-term sickness benefit, you should be looking for a job right now. And I think that's actually quite disgraceful, really.
The viewers also weren't impressed by Keir Starmer's statement. The first caller to the show was Jackie from Birmingham.
I've worked since I was 17, come straight out of school, straight into a job. I'm 51 now, but in 1998, I had an horrific car crash. Paralysed from the waist down for 6 months until I could have my surgeries. Had 2 surgeries since. Now, despite that, I've got better. Well, not got better. It's left me with back injuries for the rest of my life. I've worked despite that. I've worked in retail and I've worked in an office with a spinal condition. He is right, the gentleman on your panel,
Michael.
but even though I am under a regular orthopaedic hospital, I had an MRI done 2 years and I still haven't had the follow-up to see what was on that MRI.
Well, so
now I've pestered and pestered the secretary. I finally got in. I'm on the 7th and I'm looking at a 4th surgery. Now, what's Keir Starmer going to do with me? Is he going to take note of that I've worked since I was 17 and I've worked despite my back injuries? But now it's got to a point where my health conditions have caught up with me and I now cannot work because I cannot walk to a job. I cannot sit. I cannot stand for too long. I have to take morphine in an afternoon, which makes me sleep. What is he going to do with people like me?
Poppy from London also wasn't impressed.
I think Keir is talking out of his backside.
Thank you for that. What makes you think that, Poppy?
I am long-term sick. I'm restricted to bed full-time and have been for, 20 years plus.
Hey, wow.
Okay. And I've worked from home. No problem. I mean, I'm over 60 now, so I'm kind of nearing retirement age, but I've worked from home.
Okay,
no
but Poppy,
problem at all.
Right, well, then you're the person that Keir Starmer's really talking about. What he's saying is, I mean, it sounds like you've got a very severe illness, you're sort of in your bed, have been for 20 years, and yet you've still managed to work from home. What Keir Starmer is saying that even if you are bedridden, even if you are forced by doctors and medical staff to remain in your bed for your own health and safety, you are still able to contribute to society. You still have worth and you should still be out there contributing and doing your part. Is that a positive or a negative message?
It depends how you look at it, because I think one of the major problems is the number of employers that seem to think that because you're stuck in bed, there's nothing you can do.
So Keir Starmer's attempt to gain kudos by bashing the long-term sick has landed badly with at least some sections of the public. And as I said in the clip, I think his statement on this has been completely out of order. That doesn't mean, though, there isn't a real problem in Britain right now. The number of people economically inactive due to long-term illness has risen from 2 million before the COVID pandemic to 2.8 million now. Interestingly, before then, it had been consistently falling from around 2001. And as a piece today in the Financial Times explains, the rise is currently being driven by the young. John Byrne Murdoch identifies a rise of young people on sickness benefit. He says that in countries including the UK, US, Ireland and Sweden, the age curve of activity-limiting health conditions has flattened. Now, what that means is that while it used to be the case that disability was something that was really, really strongly correlated with age, so lots of older people said they were disabled, not many young people did, we are now seeing a big increase in the number of young people reporting life-limiting health conditions. The statistics here are fairly dramatic. In 2008, only 7% of 16 to 24-year-olds reported having a health problem that reduced their ability to carry out day-to-day activities. That has now almost tripled to 20%. The majority of those people, of course, won't be receiving disability benefits. This is what they say in response to surveys. Around 7% of this age group do sort of receive some form of disability benefit, up from 4% a decade ago. This seems to be related to an increase in mental health difficulties. This is from a recent IFS report on the same topic. So it says, the most significant change in conditions seen between the latest data and the pre-pandemic period is the rise in the share of mental and behavioural disorders, recently accounting for 41% of new personal independent payment claims compared with 32% before the pandemic. The conditions that PIP claimants have is strongly related to age, that's personal independent payments. In the post-pandemic period, 69% of new claimants aged 25 had a primary condition listed under mental and behavioural disorders. This was the case for only 22% of new claimants aged 55. So 69% of claimants in that young age group are saying or receiving disability benefits because of mental health problems. Of course, the idea of an increasing number of young people with severe mental health problems is worrying enough in and of itself, and the increase in sickness across age groups does also pose a fiscal challenge for the government. Between 2002 and 2008, total expenditure on disability and incapacity benefits hovered at around £40 billion. That's projected to double in real terms to £80 billion by 2026, as you can see here. From the yellow line, that's nearly driven entirely by an increase in working age benefits. For context here, because these are just big numbers, it can seem a bit abstract. For comparison, the education budget is around 110 billion, the NHS budget is around 180 billion, and the policing budget is around 27 billion. So those are the numbers we're talking about. Aaron, I want your thoughts on this. I don't think anyone's going to disagree it's a problem that more of us are sick. I don't think anyone sort of sees those lines go up and thinks that's great, fabulous. But I think Keir Starmer going on television and saying every single person on long-term sickness benefit should be looking for a job is appalling, frankly.
Well, he just says these things, doesn't he, Michael? And then he comes to regret it quite quickly. We saw it with Israel having the right to cut off water to Gaza, for instance. He just says these things, and I presume in a week or two he'll say he never said it. I never said that. That's just his modus operandi as a politician. You're quite right. My personal view is, and I'm sure you agree with me, I'm pretty sure you agree with me, is that it's a good thing if you're physically able to work in a good, fulfilling job where you're paid well. I think most people would like to do that. Most people are happier doing that than being out of work and being poor and being miserable. The point is, some people can't do that. There are some people who are unable to work at the moment who could be able to work. The reason why they aren't in work is because they're not sufficiently supported by the state. Now, what do I mean by that? There's an extraordinary story from NHS England in 2023. Some people, Michael, were waiting for up to 2.5 years for an MRI scan or a CAT scan. 2.5 years. 2.5 years. So you might have, incredible pain in your back, in your arm, in your leg, whatever, your neck, and you can't even access the proper diagnostic tool. 2.5 years. By the way, it's exactly kit like ultrasounds, MRI, CAT scans, which the UK really lags on. And if there is going to be major investment into the NHS, it should be first and foremost into stuff like that. So that's the first thing. We should be investing more in diagnostic tools so people can get healthier sooner. That's not going to fix this, but it's the case for many, many people. I mean, in the past, I've had excruciating pain. I had really, really bad pain in my deltoid up here. It was actually in the end a form of RSI over many years. I went to try and get an MRI, couldn't get it. And then they said, well, look, if you want to get it private, it's going to cost you about £1,000. And, I had just really bad pain for a year, ended up doing massage, tissue release, myofascial release. We got there. But in a functioning healthcare system, that would have been sorted out quite quickly. You look at the mental health stuff. We have record numbers of people now with anxiety and depressive disorders, particularly younger people. Why? Well, we're creating miserable people. We're making housing really expensive. We're really creating jobs that aren't that great. Commuting times are often high. They're entering the labour market with record debt. And then all of a sudden they're miserable. Are you really surprised? And the ones that aren't miserable, sometimes are leaving. Are you really surprised? And if they go to the NHS saying, I have a problem with my mental health, what happens? You may get some pills. You may get some pills, and you may be prescribed some talking therapy or some CBT, 5 or 6 sessions. You may. And, if you're going to see a consultant, good luck, whether that's physical or mental health, because it's going to take, again, 6 months. And again, you're advised to basically bypass that part of the system, go private, get something from a consultant, come back into the NHS, you'll save loads of time. Of course, most people can't afford to do that. So there is, I think, with regards to physical and mental health, obvious underinvestment in things like diagnosis, the hardware I just spoke about a moment ago, therapies for people with mental health issues. I think you could invest significant amounts of money into that, and that would help some of this. I'm not saying it would disappear, but I think it would make a really big dent into it. And then, of course, we need a separate conversation about why are mental health outcomes, particularly amongst younger people in this country, so bad. Now, I'm really open to a conversation about that. Maybe there are reasons which I'm not going to account for. I think ubiquitous mobile phones is probably a big thing, actually. I think probably constant access to the internet is possibly bad, especially for some people. But I don't think it's just that. I mean, if only it was that easy. I do think housing is a huge one. I say it time after time, Michael. I lived in London for 15 years. I moved 15 times. I was a very happy teenager, very happy. Guess what? On the other end of that, in my mid-30s, I was miserable. Dare I say, I was depressed. I then move out of London with my now wife. We have a child now. We have a family. We bought somewhere because we couldn't afford to buy in London. We could afford to buy on the South Coast. Guess what? I'm happy again. Who knew? So it's really important to not see as entirely distinct mental health and physical material conditions. That's not the whole story, obviously, but it's a significant part of it. And then, of course, yes, you will have some people who simply, they can't work. And I think that Keir Starmer's response in relation to that is awful. By the way, we don't need to speculate about people killing themselves because they're unable to work and being forced into work by the government. It happened. There are many documented cases of this in the 2010s after welfare benefit reforms overseen by the Tories. People killed themselves. Some people died at work. There were people with I'm not making this up. There are people with chronic health conditions who would be forced into work and have a heart attack. There were many of these stories between 2010 and 2011 and 2015, 2016, when you saw extraordinary cuts and you saw a real effort to reform, quote unquote, welfare by the Conservatives. So I think we have to start from a position of investment. And somebody who's a skeptic of that might say, oh, here we go again, spending more money as if that's going to help. Well, you know what? Actually, it's a false economy to have somebody out of work for 3-4 years because they can't get an MRI scan. That's stupid. We need more MRI scans. We need more CT scans. We need more ultrasounds. We need more consultants in the NHS. And like I say, we need more medical health treatments. And I think that's relatively straightforward. But time after time, Michael, it's just the story of this country, particularly over the last 15 years, false economy. It's the same with public transport investment. It's the same with tuition fees. And it's the same with stuff like this. We're willing to spend money on the punitive end. I'll spend money to punish people. How about we spend a bit more money, like I say, on the kit and the healthcare workers?